Hi, I'd like to review a little bit of what we talked about in class today, especially for those members who were not here. I'm going to ask you over the weekend to do a markup on this page. And what that means is grab your favorite highlighter or colored writing utensil and read very specifically and annotate as you go. When you annotate, that means that you're reading, you're marking up what you think is the most important, maybe highlighting vocabulary terms or writing in the margins along the side some of your previous knowledge, when you have heard this before or what this might connect with, and then some of the big ideas. One of the main big ideas that we discussed today is going to be the application of these numbers, which is simply the number of individuals at each trophic level, but also this information. And how is it that we've got of the 5 million joules of energy that's available at the producer level? So this is the amount of energy in the bodies of these individual blades of grass. There is 5 million joules of energy in this ecosystem. The grasshoppers, when they eat that material, only truly 10% gets locked away at this trophic level, which means only of the 5 million joules of energy here, the grasshoppers are only able to take in and keep in their bodies about 10% of the energy that was here. So if it's not in their bodies, if they've released it or they spent it chewing or hopping around or doing all the things that grasshoppers do, that means that when the layer above eats them, they won't have access to that. So the only thing that they're keeping is what's locked away in their biomass. So in cell growth, in cell structures, and stored in their lipids and carbohydrates. So that would mean that this layer's got 5 million joules of energy. This layer is only going to have 500,000 joules of energy, which is 10% of the total. The rest of this is released eventually as heat. So it's going to be work done, cellular respiration, keeping this guy and this guy alive. All that cellular respiration actually transfers into heat. Living things give off heat. They're going to jump around. That's doing work and exercising. That's also going to eventually release as heat. So there's a huge amount of loss. Again, next layer up. These mice, if they're eating the grasshoppers, that means that they're eating the bodies of the grasshoppers. Only of the 500,000 joules of energy at this level, these mice are only going to get access to about 10%. So that means we're now down to 50,000 joules of energy available at this level. A whole 90% of heat, or 90% of the energy in the layer below is lost as heat. Same thing with our upper and our top quaternary consumer up there. You'll see, again, this pattern of 90% loss, 10% transfer. That is going to limit this food chain. This is part of the reason why we don't have food chains that go up 15 or 20 layers. Because by the time you get up really high on this food chain, the amount of energy that you're truly getting from the layer below is inefficient. It's not enough to sustain you. So one last piece. While you're doing your markups today or over the weekend, would you pay close attention to this graphic? This graphic helps us visualize really what we're talking about with this loss of energy. This has got a picture of a little caterpillar. This caterpillar spends his days and nights eating and eating and eating leaves. So it says plant material eaten by the caterpillar. Let's say he takes in 200 joules of energy from all of the food that it ate, gobbling up the plant. Of that 200 joules, 100 joules, so half of its energy, is released in waste, in feces. Feces is just simply poop. So the plant matter that this little guy gobbled up, processed a little bit of it, and half of what it took in, it's pooping out. So that's not something that it's keeping. The other number we want to look at is 67 joules of energy are spent on cellular respiration. Cellular respiration means this little guy's body took in that food, used it, got it into the mitochondria, did cellular respiration, and made ATP. That ATP then allowed the cells to do work, and that work was transferred into waste. So we're going to see heat here. That work turns into released heat. The last thing that I want you to notice is the smallest of the arrows, and this little one is only 33 joules of energy out of 200. That's about 15%, a little bit less than 15% of the total. This was growth. That means that it is actually a part of this little guy's body. So if he gets eaten by a bird or a mouse, that little 15% is actually what that bird or mouse or the next consumer will have access to. So in this image, we're looking at about a 12 to 15% transfer of all the energy that this little guy took in. Only 15% is actually available to the next layer. Thanks very much. Have a great weekend.